At the beginning of my journey, I was wrong. I kind of failed. My mom was almost getting evicted back home. I had to make it work.
What is currently your worst performing property?
Oh my God, I've had situations where a family passed all references. Everything was on point. But then they turned out they were running a brothel from the property. It was just making a month.
Welcome back to another episode of the PBK podcast with myself, Kaz from Property by Kazy. Each and every week we have an amazing guest, and this week I'm joined by Hadjer. How are you doing? You okay?
Hello. Very, very good. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You are more than welcome. So Hadjer is the founder of the Growth Hack and Airbnb rent-to-rent extraordinaire with over 150 units under management. Today we're going to find out all about Airbnb, about your public speaking, about your mentoring, and how you've been able to help other people grow and successfully scale their property businesses. But before we get into all of that, I would like to start with Airbnb. I think reason being is there's been some recent changes in legislation, particularly around the VAT rating. How has that impacted the Airbnb space?
Well, I think the good thing about this, because I always look at things from the bright side. There are a lot of people who are worried about it, so they're leaving the business, which means there's more business to us. So I think it's very good that people who don't know what they're doing, like the rookie doers out there, are just worried about what the government is implementing. But I think it also puts a lot of control into what people are doing. So
just for those that are not familiar, what changes have actually taken place?
Okay, so now the government is trying to implement the fact that you have to be licensed to be running an Airbnb. Well, they're talking about it. It hasn't started as of yet, but they're talking about it, which is, I think it's good because it puts... The market now is very saturated to a point where every single person thinks they can do Airbnb. What serviced accommodation as a title. People think they can do Airbnb and just start a business without any regulations. And there's also a lot of people who have been taxed massively. So now the way to do it is to go through management companies, such like ourselves, and to do it the right way. So the legislation's in place. Then if you're not licensed in the future, then you need to get a license. You need to look into that. Okay,
so the government is leaning towards licensing, effectively very similar to the HMO space. In that to be able to operate, you would have to meet certain prerequisites.
Correct. I mean, something like this has been in place, not necessarily licensing for London, which is the 90-day rule. It's really bad for people who try to operate an Airbnb business in London, because you can only operate 90 days throughout the year. So 90 out of 365. And outside London, you can operate the way you want to, no problem. So we kind of we've always had it the hard way. So I think. Okay. Extra.
So I think, and there was also changes in relation to taxation, the VAT status of serviced holiday lets, which meant that, once you hit the £85,000 mark, they would now be VAT rateable as well. Has that meant that any of your units are no longer viable, or do they still work?
They can still operate. I mean, all you have to do is to have a great accountant and a great team behind you to know how to do things the right way. I'm not saying like do it illegally or have different accounts. There's a lot of people who are now having different accounts, multiple companies, and different ways to try to work around. But I think having a right accountant with you and your team is the best option.
I think having, leaning on professionals. I think one thing in business is that you can't be great at everything. You can't be your solicitor, your doctor, your accountant. You have to trust that the people you employ in the right places can deliver an excellent level of service. I touched on the changes because I do think you're right in that changes, whilst they can create adversity, adversity often leads to opportunity. Sort of throughout your business ventures, would you say there's any other instances where, you know, there's been potential threats to the market or your business that you've been able to turn around?
Throughout my career, I think I've seen it all. And having the right team behind you is the best. This is what we just touched on. Personally, I am really bad at admin. I'm really bad at numbers and sitting down and just drafting contract. And I am really good at meeting people, building relationships, acquiring properties, negotiation, sales, acquisition, all these I'm really good at. Whereas I'm really, really bad at, sitting behind the screen. I think this is one of your best.
Yeah, like knowing, yes, like weirdly, I feel like sometimes things that you know you're bad at, you work harder on. So like being dyslexic, I know that I'm akin to make a lot of administrative errors.
Yeah.
So I've always really focused on it to be conscious that if you know that's an obvious place where you could make mistakes, you tend to sometimes focus on it a little bit more to kind of give you that buffer.
I agree. So this is exactly what I've done. However, I have replaced myself with people who are really good at that at the beginning. So just to go back to your question, I was trying to do everything myself and I kind of failed. My business was my baby. And I kind of wanted to do everything thinking I am the best at everything. And no one can do it better than me. I was wrong. So I have seen a lot of pitfalls and I've seen a lot of failure when I was doing that until the point where I was really burnt out. So then I decided, hey, I spoke to my mentor and I said, listen, I'm burned out. What do I need to do? He said, you're doing too much. You're trying to do everything yourself. So it had a huge impact on my business. I was doing the wrong numbers. Sometimes I was looking at the deal thinking it was making sense, but in the end it was not making sense, until I actually started recruiting other people to do what I'm really bad at. And then I saw what I was doing wrong and I had to analyze my business. I had to analyze my portfolio, look at what properties are bringing good cash flow, what properties we need to let go and return to the landlord, or maybe renegotiate, or maybe use a different strategy. So I think being able to let go and not try to be the star of the show has helped me.
That's good. Yeah. I think definitely ego, being able to put ego to one side and understanding that, you know, we're not going to be the best at everything is actually, you know, a skill in itself. I think the ego of individuals is often a lot of our biggest downfalls. I think that's, you know, a really good place when we are able to let that go.
Totally agree.
Okay, so let's kind of dive into what I think a lot of people really want to understand. Like, rent to rent. In a nutshell, what is rent to rent or rent to serviced accommodation?
Okay, so rent to rent is a strategy that people use. It has different models within it. It's a property strategy where you acquire a property from a landlord as a single unit. You pay them guaranteed rent every single month, regardless whether the property is empty or full. And you choose a model, whether serviced accommodation or HMO, or maybe assisted living. It depends. There's some different models where we can use the property and you let it out, whether on a serviced accommodation, meaning night by night, just like a holiday let, or you do a HMO, which means room by room, and then the guaranteed rent, obviously, if a property is £2,000 and brings you £4,000, minus the bills and, you know, the management and maintenance, you probably end up with about 1,000, 1,100. Depends, like between 500. I would say a good deal brings you between 500 to 1,500. Depends on where you are in the country. 'Cause different areas. In London, probably the margin will be more. In different other areas, probably the margin will be low.
Okay, so then I guess the thing that most people think hearing that is, well, if you can make this extra £1,000 plus, why doesn't the landlord do it themselves?
Right, there are some tired landlords out there. Like I have two of my biggest landlords, which is the pipeline of all my business. One of whom I have 26 properties alone. Like from that one person, 26 properties from him, and the other person about 17 properties. So just these two represent a third of my portfolio. So these people are over 80 years old, both of them. So they have lived their life where they were doing a lot of work, and they don't want to do it anymore. They're happy of not having any mortgage on any of the properties. Money is coming into their account. They're retiring. They want to spend time with their families and loved ones, and you know, enjoy life. The other category of people is people who don't know what they're doing. So there's a lot of accidental landlords out there. People who have either inherited property or they got married and they had the property. They had to go and live with their partners, and then they just sit in, you know, on a property. But they don't want to do property. It's not their area of expertise. So they give it to us. They're happy with the guaranteed rent, and you know, we it's a win-win. We make money. They make money. There's another category where people live abroad. I have some landlords who are not in the country, and they can't do it from wherever they are in the world. And there's other people who have been really bitten in the past, or maybe had bad experiences with tenants, so they don't really want to go through the hustle of having an ASD and a tenant that probably they cannot kick out until after going to court. Whereas where they give it to us on a guaranteed rent, on a corporate let agreement, if we don't perform well, if we don't do any, you know, if they're not happy with us, they have the right to end, like, finish the contract after 14 days. So if we don't pay them, they have the right to go and change the locks after 14 days. No questions asked. So I think it's a win-win situation. I don't want to jeopardize my business by not paying my rent. And if it makes money, then obviously I'm going to pay my rent. And there is some peace of mind to the landlord.
And I think that's really interesting that you mentioned that, because I think a lot of people almost make property sound very different from any other type of business. But it's very much a case of just finding a product and finding the market. And that's why I asked, like, why would a landlord do that? And you've quite eloquently explained, you know, fit for purpose and creating that value proposition for the landlord themselves. Do you think in the rent-to-rent space, would you say it's harder to find the landlords or far harder to find the end user, the customer, so getting full occupancy?
Yeah, very interesting question. It's really... I think it's both. At the beginning of my journey, it was really hard for me to find the landlord.
Yeah.
I think now properties, they come to me. I don't really go to look for the properties. Now, Hadjer, right now, after this 5 years of experience, I think it's easier to find the landlord than the tenants, because it's challenging. And I think it's a lot of people who think I might be crazy. It's very challenging to find the right person to come to your property. I've had situations where a family passed all references, amazing credit score, very good references from the landlords, employers, from literally everything was on point. But then they turned out to be prostitutes. You know, like they were running a brothel from the property. Oh, wow. So I've had a situation where, you know, this is the case. So you have to then, you know, police, and, you know, the property was not, oh my God, it really smelled like.
I can imagine that there's, you know, like going up, whether it between, you know, we said parties, prostitution, drugs, unfortunately, all different types of things that, you know, people used short stay accommodation for. So how do you ensure that you get a good standard of occupant then, or the type of occupant that you want?
By doing the screening, proper screen the tenants. The guests, unfortunately, we can't run a lot of checks, because when someone comes to your property for 1 week, 10 days, you don't know who's going to end up in your property. You can always ask for documents such as IDs, and you can also check their reviews on different OTAs. But you can't do
what OTAs, sorry.
So OTAs is online travel agent. Travel agent. So
you know us property people, we throw out a lot of acronyms all the time. So I always try and make sure that I get the explanations. Because I know there's a lot of people And I think it's fair that sometimes can get a little bit disillusioned when we throw out acronyms. And if you think, I don't know what that is, we can almost switch off. So I always try and get as much explanation out there as possible. Hopefully.
Makes sense, especially for beginners who are listening to us. So the online travel agents means that every, like Booking.com, Airbnb, Kayak, whatever, all these, so they are under a term called OTA.
Okay.
So when they come from all these platforms, we don't know who's coming, right? But when we have a HMO or a single or family, we can always check their references. We call the company, we call the employers. We do use third-party companies, but we also do run our own checks as well.
I was going to say, obviously, I know with the scale you're at, obviously you're probably not meeting the majority of the tenants. However, do you allow like your employees to kind of have that kind of eye test gut feeling check as well?
Yeah, absolutely. My staff is now trained to a point where they can take decisions even when I'm not there. I think it's very important for you to duplicate yourself and training your team to think like you. I had difficulties in the beginning because it was different ways of seeing things. But when they started looking at things the way I would see them, so they were like, oh, if it was Hadjer, what would she do? And often when I started, I would go with them and tell them, this is what I do, this is how I talk. They see me, what I do and how I actually do the viewing or the inspection. And then if it's a HMO mainly, when I get that 1 or 2 people inside the house, I also ask them to contact the viewers for me. Reason being is because that person will be living with them. So I want them to take control and be like, oh, we're not happy with this person, or we love this person because we think she could fit or he could fit very well with how we are running the house. So yeah, the first 2 people, probably we do the property viewings, but then it's the tenants that do.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I actually sometimes would even, particularly in HMOs, I'd just say offer them like an incentive. Say, look, I know obviously gonna give you X, like might be like a nominal £50 off your rent for doing all the viewings and stuff like that. Yeah. But then, like you said, if people are able to find tenants that they want to live with, they're gonna be for their longer time. Hopefully they build a relationship, and that's really what you want in shared accommodation. Yeah. As much as people are paying for their room, if they have more of a household experience, they're going to stay for a longer time, and it's going to be more efficient for the household. Go on.
There will be no complaints as well.
Yeah. I mean, if you pick them, it's like,
Yeah. So really thinking smart, it's literally not having no complaints because that person, you chose that person. I didn't.
Exactly that. So let's get back to the Airbnbs. You said, it's kind of an equal weighting between finding a landlord versus finding a tenant in terms of difficulty. You touched upon systems. For those that are starting out, are there any systems that you could recommend that you would say, I like this, this, and this?
Absolutely. For HMO, I love using PayProp. Hey, PayProp, you can pay me.
Listen, no. This is my podcast. You can pay me.
Oh, hey!
Listen, my proxy, and I'll give you a little, you know what I mean?
We'll talk about it.
No problem.
PayProp is mainly for finances. It runs everything. From invoices, from rents. It sends emails to the tenants to remind them of their rent. I mean, it's literally an umbrella of everything. Yeah. And for Airbnbs, I use Avivo. And Avivo is what links all the platforms, all the OTA, all the agents, and they put them under one booking. So you don't have no hustle of going, someone comes from Verbo, you don't have to go to Airbnb or Booking.com to block off your calendar. And you don't really have to post on every single platform individually. So you do it once, one account.
And what's that called?
Avivo.
Okay,
yeah.
Nice.
One account, and you post all your pictures, all your description, and it merges through all the platforms, which I think is brilliant because if you have more than 20 properties on Airbnb, hey, you really don't want to have a lot of double bookings.
Yeah.
it would be penalized.
It's a lot of stress. Okay, so you've got PaperUp and Aviva.
Aviva, yes.
Aviva, okay, it's 2 recommended platforms. So you see, that's the systems we spoke about, you know.
They're the most
getting
important ones. Yeah,
getting
there are
landlords.
others.
Of course, yeah, there's quite a few you can use, but they're your recommended ones.
Yeah.
You're going to go off. I mean, we always try and get the recommendations from the experts. It's always good to, you know, in any part of business, I feel personal recommendations from those that are already doing it go a long way. So you got to a point now where you're managing over 150 units, but obviously you didn't start there. So if let's wind things back, acquiring your first properties, what was like your initial pitch like? Because I think for a lot of people, it's like, have you ever watched a strongman competition and they got to like push a big car or something or push the lorry? It's that getting it going is where all the real effort is. Once it's going, it's just perpetual motion and you keep working and keep repeating and you've got that momentum. Exactly. But how getting started, talk to me about your first deal, when acquiring your first deal and how long that took.
Right. I think it snowballs after that. But hey, the most challenging part is the first property. It's where all the tears are. It's where all the sleepless nights. It's where all the hustle is. My first property is a property that I still have at the moment. And I was going around agents. I was going around, I was trying to contact landlords. I was calling them. I was receiving no's. I think my pitch at that time was something like, I'm here to do work business with you, and I'll be happy to take your property and give you a guaranteed rent, and I will just do serviced accommodation or HMO. It was really blank, and I was very insecure.
When you say blank, you mean it lacked like a personal touch, or it lacked like more
vanilla?
Okay.
Like there was no personal touch to it. There was nothing that says about me. There was nothing that would tell them who I am. Why would they give it to me and not someone else who has more experience than me? I started in 2019. So it was, you know, there was a lot of people doing it then. So why would they give it to me? Why would they trust me? And to some people, their property is their baby. Yeah. So they don't want to risk it. So I think it got to a point where I think I was a bit comfortable. But then it hit me when my mom was almost getting evicted back home, and I had to make it work.
Where's back home?
Algeria.
Okay.
Yeah, North Africa.
Nice.
So then all I would, you know, like a horse thing, you know, all I could see.
That tunnel vision.
Literally. So I didn't care about the no's anymore. And I got back to learning a bit more on how to pitch, how to sell. And what helped me the most is that I used to do network marketing before, and I used to receive a lot of no's, but the mindset, the attitude, all the personal development, really, I got back to that, and I worked on myself to say, hey, what do people need to know? The best thing is to talk about themselves. People love talking about themselves. So if you want to have...
I love talking about myself. Somebody,
yes, you do.
I'm not going to name any names, but somebody called me a narcissist before this show.
Okay.
So continue. So you love to talk about yourself, just for context. Let's continue.
What was your answer? We're all narcissists, aren't we?
I said, I'm not. I think we all have narcissistic traits, and I don't think there's anything wrong with them.
We do, yes. I've done psychology as a study, so I'm a psychologist, and I think every single one of us has a bit of narcissism in us. But hey, listen, when I was going back to 2019, I think what hit me is that the relationship that I could have with people. And naturally, I'm a very kind person, very polite, and I love people. So I used that to my advantage. So I was trying to build a relationship, not a business. So I started thinking about the relationship I can have with the landlord, not just the business. So I started going around and telling people why I want to have their property. And it happened to me when I was going, I said, where am I going to find landlords? So maybe the property events, networking events, NLRA, now called NLRA, which is the National Landlord Residential
Mutual
Landlord Association.
Yeah.
So these are the events, right? But also, who knows the landlords, engineers, handymen, workers, builders? Where am I going to find these people? So I started looking at the builders, and I was giving them a commission. That's now called sourcing. I didn't know. That time I didn't know it was called sourcing. So I was not going to sources to actually work with them. So I was going to B&Qs, I was going to Wix, I was going to, I'll just go on websites and see, and I was talking to them and building the relationship with them, giving them a commission of £200 every time they introduced me to a landlord and the property works. So, and then I got my first by a friend of mine who, her dad is a builder, and he introduced me to one of the landlords he works with. And that landlord, we sat down in a cafe, and he said, I have a property, do you want to come and see it? He is one of my biggest landlords right now. So I have 26 properties from him right now. So we sat down in a cafe, and he was like, you're very young. Why would I trust you? I said, well, look, one thing is I know I'm not going to disappoint you because I need your property. It's not that I want your property. I need your property. And I told him about my mom. I said, look, my property, my family is back home and we're almost getting evicted. And if I don't help support them, I don't know what I will do. So I'm looking at any property that makes a win-win situation. And he said, okay, I've got a property that is in Chatsworth Road. That was my first property. And I went to see it. I said, can you give me 1 month free? And he said, you're very, very demanding, but it's okay. You have 1 month. The property was run down. I was paying £1,000 at that time. And I was working in Selfridges. So I used to finish from Selfridges, go to the property, do a bit of painting, buy things, paint, did everything myself, got secondhand sofas. And from the minute I posted online, I had about 18 inquiries. And I rented it for £1,400. So I got £400. And that was, oh my God, this works. In Selfridges, I was getting about £1,600. So it's like a fourth of my salary. So I was like, oh my God, this works. All I have to do right now is duplicate it. Duplicate the result, and I will have more properties. Now I have the whole building. It's 7 flats. I have another building from the same landlord. I still have the same property. It's really close to my heart because it's the first one, but it's the one that gave me hope. It told me that this business works and I have to do it right. So I think if you have ambition, if you're ambitious enough, do the numbers right, have the right pitch, tell people why you want to take their properties from you, from them, and start.
I think that's it. I think a lot of the time you have to do what works for you as well. Like strategy wise, sort of, for example, being super hard sales isn't going to be for everybody. Being super personable isn't going to be for everybody. You have to play to your strengths. I think another thing that a lot of people underestimate is the value of your existing network, because I know we've spoken in the past about you go into all these different estate agencies and, even through sourcing and what have you, but you actually said, this was through even though it wasn't somebody you knew directly, it came from an existing network. And those people that know you, know your values and the values that you hold highly are much more likely to trust and recommend you.
Absolutely.
So I definitely say for those that are looking at starting out, this isn't just in the rent-to-rent space, but any space, make sure you sing from the rooftops what you're trying to achieve. Because if people don't know, how are they going to be able to put you in touch with people that can potentially help?
Absolutely. I mean, and here is the major point. If you don't help yourself, people are not going to help you. Because you don't put yourself out there. I said, people, I don't want to really post on social media. I don't want my family to find out what I'm doing. I don't want my grandma in Jamaica to know that. I said, no, just post. Tell people what you're doing, because you're helping yourself. If you don't help yourself and don't tell people what you're doing, no one is going to know. And if they don't know, then they don't know that they need to help you. So help yourself for people to help you.
Definitely. So I think like we've touched a lot on the benefits for you particularly, and obviously how you've been able to build, you know, a management / rent to rent company. There was a few things that you mentioned like throughout that conversation I wanted to touch on. Number one was obviously you grow in a team. How many staff members do you now employ?
15.
15 staff members. And what would you say your management style is?
My management
Style, like as a manager, what do you say about yourself, and what do you think your staff would say about you?
Oh, tough question.
I'm a tough interviewer. No, I'm easy. By the way, don't listen to that. Come on my podcast. I'm lovely. I've got loads of great reviews. I just think the reason I touched on it is because you spoke about wanting to be able to duplicate yourself. So I was interested in what management style you kind of had that you were able to achieve that.
Yeah. First thing I believe is very important to have in your team is honesty. And also taking care of them. If you take care of your team, they will take care of you. If you give them a good salary, if you understand their circumstances, obviously that you don't want them to take advantage of your kindness, but don't be too strict to a point they will hate you. We have weekly meetings, Zoom meetings. We have we meet in person. We go out, and whenever there is a commission to be made, I always treat them. I think making sure that they're happy. So we have a very low turnover of staff, and when you have a very low turnover of staff, when people want to stay, is they treat the business as their own, because they know. When my team talks, sometimes they are like we. They don't say you or I. They say we did this. This is what happened. So I think is being inclusive, because I've seen it before. I've been working for someone else. I worked for someone you actually know, and it was. The morning meetings were shouting, and they were like, oh, what happened? And I'm like, no, this is not how it's supposed to be. I'm going to do my best. So I'm not going to do that.
So you learned from experience and then wanted to curate your own business culture. You mentioned about like, you know, obviously the relationships. How do you though still create that boundary between friend and friendly almost?
Yes, it's important to set boundaries and treat them as an employee. Be friendly, but they're your employees. So when things do go wrong, then listen. What happened? They do take responsibility. First of all, we have a chief of staff, so everything is reported to her. And to me, all my serious conversations are with her. So when I speak to her. At some point, I remember I was a bit harsh to a point she started crying. And I'm like, this conversation needs to be had. And she's like, no, I'm not crying because you're harsh. I'm crying because I didn't see the issue and I didn't look at it that way. And I kind of missed it. But then after that meeting, things went back to normal because it's a business and a business is ups and downs. And I know what that person is capable of doing. So running the whole organization is not down to me, it's down to the chief of staff. I put you there to control what everyone else is doing. I don't need to individually look at what they're doing themselves. We do have meetings where everyone reports, but hey, she is the most important person I need to speak to. So they respect me. Everyone else is like, yes, she's our boss. She's the one who pays us. But I
think it's sometimes good to have that gap between it, because if you have to speak to everybody and you're at every touch point, then you're involved and everybody has access for every decision. Versus if you have specific people that you speak to, you can then have maybe more friendly one-to-one conversations that are not about the day-to-day. They're not thinking, oh, you speaking to me to check if I've done this or that. You're just speaking to them to see how they're doing.
But that particular person knows exactly what. Now there is like synergy. There's also kind of, we understand each other. So if we're having a serious relationship, nothing personal. It's really nothing personal. It's just the fact that things need to be done a certain way and they have not been done a certain way because of maybe negligence or the lack of noticing or maybe knowledge, and you didn't come back to me. You didn't know. the first thing if you need to do is research it and then check with me if I'm happy or not, and then just, just go ahead and do it. But there are some times where they need to take decisions. If I'm not able to reply or respond, and they will say, we took this decision because we had to take a decision. Are you happy with it? Yes or no? And sometimes, yes, most of the time I am happy with it. And if I'm not, I'm like, listen, I know you needed to take a decision. Well done on doing so, but probably next time do it differently. This, like that.
It's having that feedback loop. Interesting. Another thing you touched on was you referring back to an early stage, where maybe some things weren't going to plan, and you were speaking about being able to follow up with your mentor. How important do you think mentors are in business?
Oof. Very important. I'm still getting mentored until today. Throughout, what I do is not just rent to rent. And I don't think people need to stop learning, because sometimes they do rent to rent and they get enough money and they're like, oh yeah, what happened if your rent to rent business collapse? What happens if there is another COVID? What happens if there is another recession? What happens if your business is not functioning well? So I am now doing purchase lease options. So I'm learning from a mentor about purchase lease options. I am doing flips. I'm learning from a mentor on how to do flips. I'm speaking on stages. I'm learning. I have 2 mentors that are teaching me how to be a public speaker. English is not my first language. In fact, it's my 4th language. So I need to be able to communicate and pass on the message to an audience who's...
What are your first 3 languages?
So I speak Algerian, Arabic and French.
Okay.
And then English. So
just checking, just making sure. I feel like that would be a question. I try and ask the questions that people would want to know the answers to.
Yeah, leaving no loopholes, huh?
Yeah, I just like to know stuff. I'm nosy. It's my job, really. I get to be nosy, which is fun.
So yeah, basically, being mentored is very, very important. Keep being educated. And there's always someone who knows better than you do. Always. I know you have PBK and people come to you to seek your knowledge. I learn from you. People learn from me. Everyone learns from... There's always someone who knows more 100%. Than you do.
So for somebody looking for a mentor, what advice would you have of how to find a good or appropriate mentor?
Yeah. Make sure they've done the work before you go and ask them to mentor you. I've seen it so many times where people get one property from a sourcer and call themselves gurus and come, I'll show you and I'll teach you how to do this. And I'm like, that's bullshit. Sorry if this is an uncensored podcast.
It's all right. No problem.
But I think there's a lot of rookie doers out there. There's a lot of people who claim that they have done loads and they call themselves that they know what. No. You should check that they have actually done things, and you should know, ask them questions, have one-to-one sessions with them, have pay them a consultation fee, 1 hour, see if they really know what they're talking about, and then go ahead with them.
Okay, so do your due diligence, potentially dip your toe in the water, and also ask questions around what they've done and other people's experience with them. Great stuff. I'm gonna ask you a couple of quick fire questions.
Go on. Ooh.
Tell me the best thing about Rent to SA. I need a quick answer.
The money.
The money. Okay. Tell me the worst thing about Rent to SA.
The people who are really horrible at keeping the house clean.
Okay. If you could only do one out of management, Rent to SA, or Rent to HMO, which would you pick?
Rent to HMO. Stability.
Stability. Okay. What is the most amount of money one property makes you on a monthly basis?
£2,600. Oh, sorry. No, £3,600 from a serviced accommodation. £2,600 just about from a HMO.
Nice. And those are really, really good numbers because they're recurring income.
Yeah.
And
but just between brackets, not every property makes that. Like, just as a disclaimer.
I've got follow-up questions.
Okay.
What is currently your worst performing property?
I had one property that I had to let go. It was just making £50 a month.
Okay. Yeah.
It was not worth it.
Yeah.
It was a management, so the property was I think it's an old contract, a very old contract, and I had to return it to the landlord. It's not worth £50 a month. And the tenant is a council tenant, and it's very, very low market. And he's on an 8%. So yeah, it was making £50 a month. I had to let go, but I don't have it anymore.
Fair enough. I think, what would you say, now that you're at a point at 150 properties, 5+ years of experience, is that right?
Yeah, about 2019, yes.
2019.
Yeah.
What would you say is like your biggest lesson?
Build people. Build a community. Because your business is about who you know and who knows you. It's about the relationships you have. I mean, you can take all my properties away from me today and I easily build another portfolio as of tomorrow, because I have the right people around me and I have the right community and I'm dealing with the right people. If I have an issue in any property, I'm not going to call the landlord. I will deal with it myself. So and your team, your power team, I'm talking cleaners, engineers, I can call them at 11 at night and they will still go and do me a favor. I had situations like this. I had people go in and the property, is a mess. A cleaner goes there at 11 in the night. So I think build people, not just the business.
Nice. What's next for you? Because you've spoken about doing lease options. You've also spoken about public speaking. What's next for Hadjer?
So I'm writing a book at the moment. It's called The Art of Rent to Rent. Okay. And I'm also...
when can we hope that to see shelves?
Don't know. I'm taking my time. Okay. I don't like to give deadlines because I'm the worst at doing that.
Okay.
Me and time, not best friends.
No problem.
So the other thing is that I'm speaking on stages and I love doing that. It's not like I don't enjoy doing property. It's just that it's not challenging me anymore. However, being on stages and talking to people and teaching them and mentoring them, I think I see more rewards and I'm so happy. I get really fulfilled when someone texts me and said, you changed my life. And I've had situations like that where people were really, really in the low. I had a tenant who was an ex-offender, and he was living in one of my properties, council tenant, like a council tenant. And he was like, oh, I would love to start a business. I'd love to do what you do. I said, listen, you can learn from me. I'm going to teach you for free. And he learned. And he's now having properties and he's changed his life. He's now wearing suits, like he goes to events and he sends me, pictures. And for me, that's very fulfilling. Helping other people to start their business and see them grow, I think is the best thing I'm doing right now.
I think that can be very, very rewarding, very, very enjoyable.
We have a membership.
Yeah?
Yeah, so we started the membership a couple of months ago. And it's also one thing I'm focused on. Okay. So getting used to filming. It's called the Growth Hack University.
Okay, nice.
Yeah, so we have it's a vault and we get people to ask me Q&A, one-to-one questions. And I think it's also very challenging because you don't know what questions you're gonna get.
Have you got any questions that you thought a bit questionable?
So, as I told you, I'm not really good at admin, I'm horrible at doing the back end. So sometimes they ask me questions and I'm like, but you know what? Next time I'm going to bring you the person who's going to speak about that topic. So I'll give them an answer in a nutshell, but I will have guest speakers, which have really great access to. And they speak about that topic.
That's good. It sounds exciting. It sounds like you've got a lot of stuff going on. Before I let you go, I'm going to ask you 2 more questions. First is, tell the people something they don't know about you.
Oh!
Listen, because there's pressure here, by the way, because pressure makes diamonds. So we're going to do a countdown.
Okay, so I am an adrenaline junkie. So I have 6 motorbikes that I ride, and I used to do breakdancing. So don't be fooled by the outfit. I actually rev.
Definitely, without a shadow of a doubt, going to find a clip of you breakdancing and put that right here. So it's going to be in the video. I'm going to speak to, you know what I mean, between LTV Productions and Raheem, we're going to get that clip in this video. Okay, so we got a breakdancing, motorbike riding extraordinaire. Lastly, we're going to leave with some words of wisdom. Give us some inspiring words for those people that are starting their journey and just need some inspiration.
It's a quote that really I live by Maya Angelou. And this is what I have been talking about throughout this whole podcast that we're having. It's not about what you sell, what you say to people. So Maya Angelou has this quote where it says, I think it's not about what you say to people, and it's not about what you do to people, but it's about how you make people feel. So it's very important to actually live by that.
Nice, amazing. Well, this has been another episode of the Property by Kazy podcast. Before I let you know, can you let everybody know how they can find you and how they can connect with you?
Yes, I'm very, very active on Instagram. So that's hadjer.beyaz. Are you going to put it down here?
It's going to be down here or in the description, one or the other.
So it's HADJER.BEYAZ. So Hadjer Beyaz at the Growth Hack University.
Amazing. That has been another episode of the PBK podcast. We are going to be back next week with another amazing guest. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe. If you've got any questions for Hadjer, comment, and I'm sure she'll be around to answer some of those questions. And we'll be back next week.
Thank you for having me, Kazy.
See ya.